Welcome to this first event of the 45th IPA Conference and Exhibition. I'm Gary Selby, current president of the IPA. The topic of today's roundtable is the new landscape of oil and gas investment in Indonesia. It's widely recognized that Indonesia still has a lot of remaining potential in terms of oil and gas reserves, whilst the demand for energy in Indonesia is much higher than current production levels. Indonesia is in the process of trying to increase overall production levels, which will, of course, need a corresponding increase in new investment. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by senior representatives from 3 Indonesian government ministries. We have Pak Arifin Tasrif, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Pak Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance, and Pak Alu Dohong, Vice Minister of Environment and Forestry. And we're going to hear about the latest strategies for improving the oil and gas investment climate here. Unfortunately, we're not able to meet face-to-face at this time due to the pandemic, but I'm still looking forward to an informative and productive session. I'd like to sincerely thank the ministers for supporting the IPA Convex by agreeing to participate in this event. We will now hear a brief opening presentation from Pak Arifin Tasrif, Minister of Energy. Over to you, Pak Arifin.
Good morning. Allow me to convey my highest appreciation to IPA for initiating this prestigious event. Through this event, I sincerely hope that we can discuss and share about new landscape of oil and gas investment in Indonesia. Indonesian oil and gas potential are huge and widely open for upstream exploration investment. We have reserves of crude oil around 4 billion barrels and then more than 62 TCF for natural gas. However, our production continues to decline while consumption is relatively increasing, which impact to an increased imports and trade balance deficit. Besides that, in other countries provide more attractive fiscal facilities for oil and gas business. Further, the recent pandemic and the rapid development of renewable energy have made the situation much more challenging. Therefore, the government has set the Grand National Energy Strategy in order to overcome the challenges in energy sector. Several strategies to meet future fossil energy needs by 2030, among others, are 1. To increase crude oil production to 1 million barrel oil per day, gas production for 12 BSCFD, and acquisition of overseas oil fields for domestic refinery demand. 2. We accelerate the development of 4 refinery development master plan and 1 grassroots refineries. Third, we improve the utilization of gas for industrial and electricity sector. Fourth, additional city gas network by 10 million household connections. Fifth, increase domestic LPG production. Sixth, to build gas transmission, LNG receiving terminal, and energy buffer infrastructures. Looking at the condition of national economy, the upstream oil and gas industry must continue to be an economic locomotive, both in terms of state revenues and as a multiplier effect driven. For this reason, it is very important that all industry players are aware and strive to realize production targets set by the government, both in the short-term and long-term plan of oil and gas production of 1 million barrel oil per day and 12 BSCFD by 2030. There are 4 main strategies that need to be carried out and pursued in an extraordinary manner by all upstream oil and gas industry players in order to achieve the program, namely optimization existing production, transformation resources to production, acceleration chemical enhanced oil recovery and exploration for big discovery. Nowadays, the global energy sector is moving toward energy transition and net zero emission policy, striking the balance between increasing oil and gas production and carbon emission target. We should promote low emission technology and innovation, including deployment of carbon capture, storage, and utilization in oil and gas fields, maximizing energy efficiency measures on all activities, implementation of carbon cap and trade initiative, and promotion of carbon offsetting. To attract more investment in the new areas, government has announced new terms and conditions in Indonesia Petroleum Bidding Round 2021, which is more attractive. The new terms and conditions covers improvement of profit sharing split, DMO price, shareable first trans petroleum, and open bid signature bonus and flexibility in choosing of contract schemes. Natural gas is less carbon fossil fuel. The emissions from its combustion are much lower than those from coal or oil. Therefore, it is very suitable to be used as alternative energy towards clean energy. In optimizing natural gas utilization, Indonesia has targeted that gas would take 22% of its share in the energy mix by 2025 and more to 2050. Gas become the future of green energy together with renewable energy. The government also encouraged the use of gas through gas infrastructure development across the nation, such as gas transmission pipelines. Recently, we are planning to build Central Java and also Central Sumatra, city gas network, LNG small-scale and virtual pipeline, as well as the conversion of diesel to natural gas for power plant with total capacity more than 1.6 gigawatt in 52 locations with indicative gas volume more than 166 BBTUD. Gas as one of green energy sources is now prioritized to meet the domestic use. In 2020, gas for domestic market reached 63%. Power and industrial sector are the biggest gas consumer in the country, 12% and 20% respectively. Gas is also used as raw materials in fertilizer and petrochemical industry, lifting, city gas, and transportation. To fulfill demand in the long term, the supply is targeted around 12 BSCFD, which comes from existing fields, new projects, and potential supply, such as Jambaran Tiung Biru, IDD project, Kasuri, Tangguh Train 3, and Abadi Field. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, we invite the contribution of all related stakeholders in explore, produce, and developing the oil and gas sector in Indonesia, as well as arising of new innovations and satisfactory solutions that will bring prosperity to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Pak Arifin. And now we move into the Q&A session. So this first question is for Pak Arifin. We're all aware that the last year or so has been very difficult in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding drop in global oil and gas prices. But are we making progress towards the 1 million barrel of oil per day and 12 BCF of gas by 2030 production targets? And do you think they are still realistic and achievable? Pak Arifin.
Thank you, Gary. One of the challenges on those two targets is the crude oil production target. However, the results of the firm commitment program of PHC Jambi Merah, which by the way is the most extensive exploration survey in Indonesian history with 13,000 kilometer seismic survey done resulted in 5 focus areas of prospective oil production in eastern Indonesia. The 5 areas, namely Timor, Seram, Buton, Warim, and similar play to the Salawati Basin. These focus areas have been confirmed by senior subsurface specialists, which we will further develop. So it shows that we still have potential resources. For crude oil from non-conventional production, the focus area will be at Central Sumatra and East Kalimantan. The main target is currently at the Rokan Block area. Our current numbers on those 2 prospects above shows possible prospects to achieve the crude oil production target by 2030. As for gas production, we are confident that the existing field has still significant resources to be further developed by providing extensions of PSCs and also attractive incentives, such as the expansions of PetroChina Jabung field, BP Tangguh field expansion, Kangian MEG Transyasun and Batur field expansion, ARIS at Marrakesh and Maha expansion, also ExxonMobil Cepu expansion. The MEMR and SKK team is also currently intensifying its exploration activities at proven areas. These efforts are carried out in areas that have quite significant subsurface and drilling data. Our focus on this program will be namely at the Central Sumatra Basin, East Natuna Basin, and also Northeast Java Basin. The application of advanced technology such as processing modeling and the use of advanced computers, the application of new acquisition technologies such as the use of full tensor gradiometry, more advanced data processing technology are currently being utilized to enhance and increase finding prospects. I would like also to add and report the significant development of subsurface data integration at MEMR, combining data from PSC, SKK, and data from Lemigas, Oil and Gas Director General, and also Badan Geologi under the coordination of Pusdatin. This is an important and significant asset for subsurface evaluation.
Thank you, Pak Arifin. We can see from recent regulatory changes that the government is working hard towards achieving their hydrocarbon production targets, whilst at the same time striving to meet their emission reduction commitments. The improved terms offered in the recent bid round were a clear example of this, and thank you. We would like to hear more detail about some of the new strategies and incentives that the government plan to implement to attract the investment necessary to achieve this. Pak Arifin, please.
I would like to answer in 2 separate replies for existing contracts and the new contracts we are tendering. First, existing contracts. Thanks to Ministry of Finance, we are currently providing aggressive splits to contractor with cost recovery scheme based on government regulation number 27, year 2017. This aggressive split has been given to Pertamina Hulu Mahakam. So it is basically done. We are currently providing incentives such as on income tax regulation based on law number 2, year 2020, and also incentives based on government regulation number 27, year 2017, such as shareable first trans petroleum and also extension of PSC. These measures provides opportunity to develop a giant petrochemical complex at West Papua with natural gas supply from Genting Oil Kasturi. We encourage continued investment in coal-bed methane by providing flexibility to contractor to select cost recovery scheme or gross split scheme. New Energy has selected to revise its cost recovery scheme into gross split scheme, which we approved. As for Genting Oil Kasturi Limited, we also introduced the use of Law Number 2 of 2020 for new development at Cepu by ExxonMobil. While we are also currently to provide more aggressive splits for gross split scheme based on Government Regulation Number 53, year 2017, developed together with Ministry of Finance. This is still under implementation finalization, and Pertamina Hulu Sanga will be the first recipient of these new incentives. However, other than splits, we are also currently improving our participating interest regulations, which is under finalization and will be issued soon. Also, we have revised the regulations which mandates all crude oil to be sold to Pertamina. Second, new contracts offering. By the end of this year, there are 6 concession areas will be offered, with 4 direct bids and 2 regular auctions. Several improvements are included, such as being free to choose scheme, gross split or cost recovery, a more aggressive split for K3S, no minimum signing bonus, only 3 years relinquishment if firm commitment fails, also 10% of FTP, and 100% full price DMO for crude oil, as long as contracts and more others.
Thank you for that, Pak Arifin. And now for the Vice Minister of Finance. We're all concerned about the recent decline in oil and gas exploration activity in Indonesia, and we know that exploration is expected to contribute at least 10% of the 2030 production target. What role do you think the MOF can play in trying to attract the increased exploration investment in Indonesia?
First of all, I would like to thank the organizer, the IPA, for this ministerial roundtable this time with the theme of the new landscape of oil and gas investment in Indonesia. I understand that the IPA has been very active in this kind of discussions, engaging with the stakeholders from all over the sectors in order to continue the increase of the investment and the awareness of oil and gas sector in Indonesia. I'm very happy that the IPA invites the Ministry of Finance and to discuss the oil and gas investment in Indonesia. I believe that this sector is very important for the Indonesian economy. It has been very important for the Indonesian economy, but of course, to the future, we will have different kinds of perspectives that I believe this roundtable ministerial meeting can also spark some ideas about. So thank you very much once again for inviting us, the Ministry of Finance, and happy to discuss if there are further discussions on the oil and gas investment in Indonesia. From the Ministry of Finance, we are looking at this sector very carefully. The oil and gas sector is very important in the state budget, as you all know. And with that, we are very keen to see how the investment can increase. At the same time, we are facing challenges, future challenges that are very important for the Indonesian economy, including the green economy, the renewable perspectives of our energy transition is very important. I believe that we can discuss this further during this ministerial roundtable. So with that, thank you very much once again for inviting us. Let me give you the perspectives, the situation that we face right now. Yeah, for a year and a half, we have been hit by the COVID. As Indonesian first case was March the 2nd, 2020 last year. That means we have been like a year and a half. And the COVID changed the way we operate, the way we have activities. This session is a testament to the changes in our way of doing things. I think in previous experience, I understand that IPA meetings like this will be held in a place or inviting a big number of audiences in a room, and we all together will be able to discuss and talk. Right now, we do it through the virtual meeting like this one, through Zoom. I believe that it changed the perspectives of a lot of perspectives in our way of doing things. That is also the same with the way we do the budget, for example. We do right now the budget, Indonesian budget has to be very responsive, has to be very anticipative, and at the same time has to be flexible enough for the government to support the economy during the COVID pandemic. We believe that we need to make sure that the budget is ready for us handling the COVID pandemic. I believe that all of you follow the Indonesian budget that not only that is implemented this year, but also the one that we have already submitted to the Parliament for next year's budget plans. What do we see? Of course, during the pandemic, we see that the revenue goes down. Number of transactions goes down, consumption goes down, and that is why the government revenue is also going down. But at the same time, it is very important that the government supports the economy by way of, because the negative growth of consumption, negative growth of investment, just like what we see last year, government expenditures is the only GDP component that is of the positive economic growth. That is the first role of the budget, counter-cyclical to the economic situation. And the government is committed to that, responsive, anticipative, and flexible budgets. Now, when we look at the situation in the bigger perspectives of what we see, the oil and gas contribution to the budget is through the revenue, and also we also see some numbers on the government spending, the subsidy, the royalties, and also some of the government financing is very important to the oil and gas investment perspectives. The first and for all, the budget has to maintain this, has to maintain the investment climate through the revenue, through the spending. Now, if we look at the bigger perspective of our country, oil and gas investment is not only very important for today, but also very important because Indonesia has also the commitment to reduce the emission, the carbon emission. The Paris Agreement that we signed and that has been ratified into our law is the targets that are important for us to achieve. So I believe that investment is important. At the same time, commitment, Indonesian international commitment is also very important. We would like to promote the investment. We would like to promote the investment climate so that the oil and gas investment can continue to increase. But at the same time, it is very important to secure the energy and secure the Indonesian international commitment as well. So this is the balance that we have to strike. We have to strike the right balance on all of this. And if you ask how the budget, how the Ministry of Finance actually can support, let me add one more thing. It is also important from our economic point of view to look at the balance between what Indonesia produce and what Indonesia actually buys from the international market. Of course, we can see that in the balance of payment, and in the very important to look at how much that we import and how much that we actually produce. That's why it is very important for the investment climate to we continue to promote the investment climate in the oil and gas investment. So coming down to your question, what is the role of fiscal? The role of fiscal is to provide the good investment climate. I think you all know that the cost recovery regime is implemented. At the same time, gross split regime is also there. Different details of this, I believe IPA is in close contact with my office, the Ministry of Finance, different parts of the Ministry of Finance, the Fiscal Policy Office, the DigiTax, in order to continue to look at the correct role of revenues, tax revenues, non-tax revenues that are possible out of the oil and gas investment. And I think I would like to appreciate IPA as well as the oil and gas sector to continue to discuss with us the right format, looking for the right perspective in this. Let me give you the broad perspectives of Indonesian tax issue that I believe is also very important to the oil and gas sector. One of the very important, I think, is that right now our corporate income tax rates is on the way down. Next year, this year is 22%. Next year it will be 20% for the corporate income tax. And of course, this is for all sectors. This is for all corporates. So, including the oil and gas sector will benefit from the reduction of the corporate income tax. And other incentives includes the different other incentives on tax for each of the regime. I mentioned earlier the cost recovery as well as gross split. And also very important that we hope that with these incentives, it will increase the investment climate, especially during the COVID, especially because of the COVID starting last year. The government also provides different tax incentives that is meant to reduce the burden of, especially the cash flow burdens of the companies. So the reduction in the income tax of Article 21, 22, 25. I believe that each of the corporates has already been using those incentives. I really hope that it can provide the oil and gas sector enough cushions to go through this pandemic. The government is committed that we are very keen to support the oil and gas sector, and I'm encouraging the oil and gas sector to use the different incentives that the government is providing specifically for the oil and gas sector as well as for the whole economy. So I think that is the role, especially the fiscal role, which I believe that can be used by the oil and gas sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. And now a related question for the Vice Minister of the Environment and Forestry. Is it possible to simplify the environmental permitting process for oil and gas activities without compromising our efforts to protect the environment?
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, the type of environmental permits and other technical approval for oil and gas activities is very much depend upon the stage of mining development. At the exploration stage, for instance, the company is compulsory to carry out, we call it UKLUPL study, or environmental management and environmental monitoring effort. In addition, technical approvals on water, air, and hazardous waste as an environmental consent, as well as approval for the forest area use borrow, or we call it EPPKH, for those located within protected and production forest areas. And at the exploration stage, environmental impact assessment permit, as well as technical approval on water, air, and hazardous waste, and environmental consent, as well as approval for the forest area use borrow, for those located within protected and production forest area. So aforementioned permits and technical approval are boldly stipulated under the law number 11/2020 regarding omnibus law on job creation, and also government regulation number 22/2021, government regulation number 23/2001, ministerial environment and forestry regulation number 4/2021, and number 5/2021, and number 6/2021, as well as number 7/2021. Those legal bases streamline permitting system and strengthen law enforcement while protect the environment. So streamlined business license has been started with information system of OSS RBA, or online single submission and risk-based approach, and Ministry of Environment and Forestry among the first to develop the system with environmental approval as one of the requirements.
Thank you, Pat. Now on to a slightly more sensitive subject. There's clearly the potential for slight conflict between the various objectives when we consider the stated goals of 1, maximizing oil and gas production to meet the long-term targets, 2, meeting the national commitments on climate change and emission reductions, and 3, minimizing any negative impact on the state budget. The proposed new carbon tax would be a good example of this. Whilst it will increase tax revenue in the short term and encourage the transition to greener energy sources, it will clearly be an additional burden and therefore a disincentive for new investments in the oil and gas sector. So the same question really to each of the 3 ministries: how can the 3 ministries cooperate and collaborate to agree a common strategy for the next 10 years, which strikes a balance between these apparently conflicting goals?
Of course, we have a good understanding and coordination with the ministries. Let us look at the gas price policy implementation for various industries outlined in the presidential decree. Reducing government income in upstream gas revenues has resulted in lower gas prices for industries, which impacted export, jobs, and economic growth. All ministries agreed and understand that we are currently importing crude oil and also fuel products, while we also export natural gas. So we have to optimize our natural gas consumption domestically. We are currently proceeding with the program of conversion of diesel power generation to gas power generation, particularly at eastern part of Indonesia, where gas are in abundance. It's a policy and program supported by all ministries through Presidential Decree number 122/2020. However, we understand the urgency to develop the oil and gas reserves as soon as possible, because within 30 years, the transition energy will arrive and fossil fuel will be significantly phased out. If Indonesia does not develop quickly, we will not capitalize these available natural resources assets. Even today, we are already facing challenges in oil and gas investment decisions due to global energy transition shift. We believe maximizing oil and gas production with the implementation of the carbon capture technology to reduce the CO2 emission will improve the state budget?
Thanks for the question. I think my perspective is like this. The government has a very clear perspective, very clear objectives. That is the welfare of the people. In that sense, I do not see the conflicting roles between ministries within the government. We have a clear objective, the welfare of the people. So the question is always which way that we have to take in order for the improvement of people's welfare. And of course, the perspectives are very much affected by not only by the internal perspectives of Indonesia, but also by the international. The international perspective is also very important. So that is why these ministries are always in close coordination, in close contact, in close discussions, not strictly only to explore the differences, but actually to explore which way is the best way for the Indonesian people's welfare. And that is also true for the oil and gas. That is also true for other sectors as well. The objective is to provide Indonesian with better welfare in terms of the energy demand, in terms of the environmental quality, in terms of the better life. And I can see that the private sector, especially big private sectors around the world, is also very, very keen to explore that. And that is the reason why big companies right now is looking at the renewable energies as a way to fulfill the future objectives of the human condition or the mankind. So from the government point of view, we don't see any conflicting issues. It's just a matter of which way is the best way, given the situation that we see, to improve the welfare of the people. Now, having said that, I also see that the fossil energy or the renewable energy can go together. It is not something that of course, the fossil energy, I think a lot of multinational company understands that renewable energy is the future. And because of that understanding, we are looking at that direction. I can also see that in the financial sector is also looking at the renewable energy is the way forward. More and more initiatives on the financial sector to promote the renewable energy and to make sure that it is the kind of energy that we will produce for the welfare of our people. So it is about the transition. I think it's very important to refer to the just and affordable transition that can balance between the growth and the sustainable welfare for the people. That is the very perspectives that we keep on the government. Now, going into what you specifically mentioned about the carbon tax. The carbon tax, we put that as a clause, as an article in the currently discussed the draft of the law on tax. We are officially in the discussion with the Parliament on that one. But what I would like to mention here is that what does it represent? The carbon tax actually represent the future way of we are looking on how we are looking at the economy, the environment, the choices of how to improve the people's welfare. it is more than just about government revenue. It's about the new perspectives. What is important for us? And I think I understand that multinational company, multinational and also international debates, international discussions on this has been very intense and going to be very intense, continue to be very intense in the future. And I think it's good. So if I may outreach to you all, it is not only about the government revenue. It is about the new way, the new perspectives that we want to provide the signals. We provide the signals to the people. We provide the signals to the international community. We provide the signals to the world. What kind of welfare that Indonesia would like to continue about. So I believe that a lot of sectors is looking at this discussion about the carbon tax very closely. We also would like to have inputs from all of the sectors. It is not meant to burden. It is not meant to burden specific sectors or specific corporate. No, it is a way of life. It's the perspective of our future. So having said that, the government is very aware that we need to provide a structure of a carbon tax that is just and sustainable. Coming back to the principle I mentioned earlier, what is just and sustainable for all of us? It is far from the intention of collecting revenues in the short period of time, as many as possible. No, it's far from that. Very far from that. I can assure you. The discussions that we have within the government, we would like to provide the signals. What kind of Indonesia do we want? And carbon tax, I think, will later must be detailed. We start to talk about the cap and trade system. We start to talk about the cap and tax system. We do not have specifically the emission tax, but we do provide differentiations for products that are creating emissions and products that creating less emissions, especially I'm talking about the vehicles, for example, a different tax structure on the basis of the emissions. Now we would like to provide the carbon tax as we put on the draft of the law. So we would like to get these perspectives from the economy, from the corporations, from the people at large, from the sectors. Is it the way we should go? Is that the way we should go? And as a matter of impact to the specific sectors, I think that is what we have to think about. And of course, it is not going to be completely detached from the international discussions, the international community, the financial sectors that also start to look at their preferences to the future. So that is my perspectives about how the government is coordinating one with the other, especially the ministries with the Minister of Energy and also the Minister of Forestry and Environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. National baseline of GHG emission, target of GHG emission reduction and projection to 2030 under the first NDC. Indonesia were decided among the Minister of Environment and Forestry and all related ministries. These were developed with refer to sectoral policies and master plan. For energy sector, this document refers to the National Energy Policy, KIEN, And at RUEN, similar approaches were used for preparing a long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilient in 2050. Coordination and cooperation mechanism has been established in the preparation of the second national communication that has been submitted to the UNFCCC. As these two largest contributors of GHG emission reduction, Ministry of Environment and Forestry works actually closely with Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in ensuring the annual target of NDC under the roadmap of NDC and in synergizing many cross-cutting policies between forestry and energy sector. And Ministry of Finance has been actively creating innovative fiscal instrument to support the achievement of NDC target. For example, through the Green Sukuk or Green Bond, Indonesia Environmental Fund has been initially established for managing result-based payment for RED Plus, and now start to explore any opportunities of funding mechanism for energy sector. In short, these three ministers work together for economic growth and for the environment and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers on that. Now a question for Pak Arifin. In relation to the 12 BCF target by 2030, how does the government plan to increase domestic gas production to these levels? And is there an integrated upstream, midstream and downstream plan in place to facilitate this? Pak Arifin, please.
At first, we have to build the gas infrastructures, such as terminals, pipeline transmission, set a policy for competitive gas pricing to attract more investment in industries. In the past, we have two major consumers of natural gas, such as PLN and fertilizer industries. We also increased the utilization of natural gas for power generation, has become one of our major targets, particularly the conversion of diesel power generation to gas power generation. Also, we would prioritize the natural gas utilization in Java for other downstream industries instead of fertilizer. However, there are also new consumers that we should support, such as downstream industries, which needs lower natural gas price to compete with other similar industries in other countries.
And now a related question for Pak Do-Hong. Gas is known to be a cleaner energy source than coal or oil, and globally plays a significant role in the energy transition. What can the Environmental Ministry do to encourage increased domestic gas consumption? Thank you, Pak Do-Hong.
Thank you for that question. Actually, increased sustained gas production and distribution could encourage power plants, industries, and households to use gas with consideration of its affordability, accessibility, and product continuity. Gas could substitute the use of coal in power plants, in which in line with government policy for coal phasing out. Thank you.
Thank you. And a similar question for Pak Suhasil. As a cleaner energy source, can gas usage possibly be prioritized via fiscal clean energy incentives?
I think it's if we have a if we look at the perspectives about the renewable energy, there are of course alternatives of renewable energy that are available, each with its own cost structure, especially cost structure, yeah. Gas and then winds or solar or others. And my understanding is that it is very important that the energy mix is very important. It is very important for Indonesia to look at the potential energy mix, and I believe the RUEN has already put in place those perspectives those potentials. And it is also very important to match that with the demand that, of course, is population-based. The demand is economic-based. If the economic continue to increase, the demand will continue to increase. But when we look at last year, when the economic situation is actually declining, then the demand for energy is very, Indonesian demand for energy is also declining, and that mandates each corporate and each sector to readjust their planning. Now, if I look at the gas sector, I think it's very important that the comparisons between the gas and the other source of energy, the primary source of energy, is continue to be in the comparison. I believe we will continue to be in the constant adjustment. It's the technicalities of gas structure is going to be very important, affecting the technology in the sector is going to be very important, and demand going to be very important, especially as well as the continuous efficiency in the demand and so on. The gas sector for the Indonesian case, I think it is going to be very important to make sure that the oil and gas sector, especially the gas sector, can continue to operate in the environment that are self-adjusting. And of course, self-adjustment is usually affected by the demand, the supply, the technology, the prices that appears in the market. I always believe that prices can signal for can trigger the adjustment, and it's a natural adjustment, and even the corporates are able to understand and to respond to the price signals. And price signals will be very important in order for the resources that are available to be allocated in the most efficient ways. So if you ask about how can we continue to promote the gas and also the government incentives for the gas, it's I understand that the current incentives on tax, on the indirect tax, as well as the non-tax regulation of the gas sector, I think it's also on the constant evaluation and a constant discussion with the corporates. What is the best way to go about that? I would like to encourage that we should continue to find the right balance and provide the incentives that are reflecting the environments, the demand, the supply, the technology, the prices that are very important to for us to get the true values of the gas. And I always think that it's not going to be stuck only in one time. Corporates with what happens with the gas is also has every single incentives to find other sources of primary energy. And I believe that is what we have to, the role of the government to provide, to make sure that the corporates, the private sector, especially those in the oil and gas, to continue to find the right technology, the right balance, the right allocations of resources. And it is important that such a decision, that the government can continue to support that decision by providing the right environment for such decision. Again, the demand and especially the market for that may even reflect the prices that for that decision. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Suhasil. Moving on now, regulatory uncertainty and lack of contract sanctity are commonly quoted as two of the biggest hurdles to increased investment here. A question for Pak Arifin and Pak Suhasil. Do you feel that the government typically considers these aspects carefully before implementing any new laws or regulations? And what more can be done to help prevent this going forward and to reassure potential investors? And can the IPA play a role in this? Arifin?
I assure you that the government is strongly committed to improve the policy-making efficacy and enhance regulations, effectiveness, and certainty in the oil gas business in Indonesia. With the enactment of Omnibus Law, the regulation has been streamlined, and we will continue to improve to be more and more attractive for our prospective investors. We will continue to improve regulations. In principle, we respect the sanctity contract. We will communicate with all relevant institutions to always maintain the upstream oil and gas investment climate. I think the current relation between MEMR, SKK, and IPA are stronger than ever. We will listen to IPA and we resolve issues together so that investment could foster in this industry.
Thank you. And now Pak Suhasil.
Thank you. I think it's important as very basic principles. It's very important that the contract is an institution for the certainty of planning and certainty of implementation. It's very important to have good contracts. I believe good contracts is a basis of good planning and good implementation. Now, so it is important for the parties that are get into the contract to understand the corridor of those contracts. And the understanding must come at the very early, even before the contract is signed. So a good contract which importantly may preserve the rights of each party in a fair manner, I think is very important. And this is where usually the assumption is that the economic situation will just continue to be, healthy and so on. But as a basic principles, it is very important that the contracts to be acknowledged and to be bound for the parties in the contract. Right now, the government is very aware about the different regulations that are sometimes some people see that as a lot. I'll take an example from the tax regulations. Tax regulation is usually considered as Indonesian tax regulation is a lot and very complicated. But I can also tell you that at the same time, some people can still get away with Indonesian tax. It's and that is the reason why it is important for the regulation to be right from the beginning, to be very, very careful about the regulatory impact analysis. And it should be done in a comprehensive way. Regulation that is not only issued on the basis that very narrow, only for looking at a certain sector per se, but the regulatory impact analysis, the comprehensive regulatory impact analysis is very important to understand the relationship between one regulation with another and how it's going to impact different lines of operations, different agents, how it's going to impact the corporate, how it's going to impact the people, how it's going to impact the demand, the supply, technology, or even impacting the economy, the wider economy. So so I think those two, good contracts to provide certainty for the operation and implementation, for the planning, operation, and implementation. Contracts that are fair. It is important to define fairness, and that is what we have to define right from the beginning before the contract is signed. And at the same time, regulation, which is the government that issue. I think it's very important for the government issuance of regulation to provide, to assess the regulatory impact analysis in order to make sure that it is, we understand how it's going to affect different agents in the economy, the corporates, the people, and others. The role of IPA, as I understand, all of these years has been trying to provide the inputs, gathering the corporates in the oil and gas sector, and use the IPA as a channel for the communication with the government, with the regulators. Although each of the companies may also contact the regulators at any time, that is completely okay. IPA can also provide that as can be used as a media to talk to the government. So that's why we appreciate what the IPA has been doing all of this time, and encourage the IPA to continue to play that role. As I mentioned earlier, it's all to find the right format, the optimal format, the optimal balance, because the situation is very dynamic. The economy is very dynamic, and with all of this COVID, is even more dynamic in nature. So it's important to continue to discuss and continue to coordinate the private sector, the government, the market, even the politics is also very important to play the role to provide the optimal corridor for to get the objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. And a specific question for Pak Do Hong on a similar vein, continuing from that previous question. Currently, there is a draft regulation regarding carbon pricing, and next will be carbon trade and offsetting. As you know, the government has a target of achieving 1 million barrels of oil and 12 BCF of gas by 2030. What is your view for balancing these targets with the new regulations and how we can achieve this going forward? Pak Do Hong.
Thank you. Energy sector is the largest principal contributors of emission after follow in NDC target. So actually, GHG emission activities from energies come from power generation, transportation, energy use in industry and building, including residential and commercial. Oil and gas together with coal have been dominating the primary energy supply, for example, in 2000 up to 2019, with currently notable increase of biofuel in the last 5 years, and the final energy consumption mainly for industry and transportation. Referring to the National Greenhouse Gases Inventory 2020, prepared by Ministry of Environment and Forestry, together with Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, GHGs emission from power plant and refinery increased from around 95 million tons CO2 equivalents to 290 million tons CO2 equivalent in 2019. While emission from fugitive oil and gas relatively constant, around 40 million tons CO2 equivalent in 2000. Under the first NDC and updated NDC, oil and gas and coal are projected to increase in 2030 and as a majority in primary energy consumption and final energy consumption. Under the LCCR 2050, under the low carbon compatible with Paris Agreement scenario, consumption of oil will decrease and gas will increase in 2030 with significant growth of renewable and efficiency measures. Oil and gas production target 1 MMBPD and 12 BCFD in 2030 will affect the increase of GHG emission. The challenge is GHG emission from oil and gas sector has not yet calculated in national GHG inventory due to lack of availability of activity data. In order to balance this target with the effort of GHG emission reduction, several measures have been put in place. Oil gas operation have to be designed with technology for zero flaring or venting, including methane capture, CCS or CCUS, and applying energy efficiency in drilling, processing, and transportation. Identification of potential deployment of CCUS in oil and gas in some fields for enhanced oil recovery or gas recovery has been conducted. Expertise of the CO2 transport, injection, and storage have already been existed in the upstream oil and gas industry. Need to be nurtured, then utilized to support CCS or CCUS activities. So with regard to the new regulation on this carbon trading, for example, I think this kind of effort of emission reduction can be valued, in order to create what we call it the emission reduction certified emission. Something like that we can trade it into the carbon market, for example. Thank you.
Okay, now we have a final question to Pak Arifin and Pak Suhasil. Can you explain why you think Indonesia still represents an attractive investment destination? i.e., what does Indonesia have to offer that allows it to compete both regionally and globally for the ever-decreasing pool of upstream oil and gas capital? Pak Suhasil?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think, again, this is a very important question that sets the background for the Indonesian investment climate. I think I can tell you that, again, the perspectives on that question cannot be separated from the situation that we face right now. That is the pandemic situation. And since the pandemic, we changed the way we work. That also changed the way we demand energy. That's what I'm trying to say. pandemic at the same time, this pandemic at the same time is creating the economic crisis that we see. Indonesia, for example, last year, we finished economic growth with minus 2.07% economic growth into 2020. We expect that this year Indonesian economic growth will be positive. We have already seen in the last second quarter 7.07% year-on-year for the second quarter 2021. We expect, of course, will be continue to be positive for the remaining of the year. But a lot of what happens with the Indonesian economy depends on the evolution or the of the COVID virus, and the virus itself is mutating, and we see the impact to Indonesia since last June, July, when the Delta variant actually hits us. Of course, this is a situation that is very uncertain to the future. But what I mentioned earlier about the government is very keen to make sure that the investment climate is continue to be good in Indonesia is very important. So that is the reason why for the Indonesian government, we do not want to waste the crisis. Despite the crisis, end of last year, the government of Indonesia put in place a very serious structural reforms in the form of the job creation law. It's the law number 11/2020, the job creation law. It's a new way of working for Indonesian structural reform. We introduced the one-stop service. I think you have already seen the launch of the OSS by the president a couple of weeks ago. And even before that, there are a number of activities, a number of initiatives that are coming out of the job creation law. We have established Indonesian first sovereign wealth fund, which is going to be very important investment perspectives for the future Indonesia. And some people, some sectors have already seen that our sovereign wealth fund is a new avenue of investment for Indonesia. It is a way to attract a number of capital into Indonesia. And I believe that the oil and gas sector is also very potential to participate in our sovereign wealth fund. Indonesia is, of course, in terms of the oil and gas sector, as I said earlier, will continue to look for the right balance between the economy, the climate change, and also the energy demand that are going to appear in Indonesia. It is also very important to note that the oil and gas sector has very specific fiscal incentives, very specific fiscal treatments, if I may say, among other sectors in Indonesia. And those fiscal treatments for the oil and gas sector, we continue to search for the right format that can create better investment climate. Indonesian, I don't have to mention Indonesian population, 270 million people, and with a positive growth, still going to continue for the energy demand, and that is market. Of course, it is a market that is completely different from the market 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So much efficiency in the energy is coming, but there are a number of initiatives that are very important to the future, and this is the energy initiatives that are very important to to the oil and gas sector. At the same time, the government, as what you can see in this ministerial roundtable, is very keen to work together in order to make sure that the investment climate can continue to be promoted. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, the Ministry of State-owned Enterprise, Ministry of Finance are among the ministries that are very, very close in coordination in order to continue to assess the oil and gas investment, oil and gas sector, the impact to the sector, the impact to the budget, and the impact to the economy. We will make sure that this is going to be to continue for Indonesia, so that we can continue to find the right balance and make sure Indonesia is a good investment place for the oil and gas sector. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pak Arifin, same question.
I have the opportunity to carefully listen to a stakeholder which is focused on Indonesia. The oil gas reserves are significant. Infrastructures are already available. Large domestic market and also near to export market. So if we provide incentives for investment and also ease of doing business, Indonesia is still an attractive market. Ever onward and never retreat. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Arifin. And a final question to Pak Dohong. With the world moving towards net zero, and with Indonesia hopefully still an attractive proposition for oil and gas investors, what additional support can be given by the Environmental Ministry to encourage that investment while still protecting the environment? Pak Dohong.
Indonesia has a specific production target for oil and gas in 2030, right? And current improvement of permitting system under Omnibus Law on job creation, clear long-term climate policy in 2050, and plan for development of carbon pricing, including for oil and gas industries, indicate the clear medium and long-term direction that could attract foreign investment. It also encourages oil and gas industries to move toward green companies. Although ease of doing business in Indonesia is still lower compared to three other Asian countries, namely Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, but it shows some progressive improvement. Considering the incentive of nature of carbon pricing, Ministry of Environment, Forestry, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, IPA, and oil and gas industry could start the discussion on potential carbon pricing in the sector, similar to what has been developed in power sector. Potential activities that are explored currently by some countries, companies, and institutions are CCS or CCUS, for example, in Gandhi and Tangguh. This discussion should be firstly started with GHG inventory to basically set the baseline for caps and mechanism for trading or offsetting carbon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's ministerial roundtable. I'd like to once again thank our three speakers, Pak Arifin Tasrif, Pak Dohong, and Pak Suhasil, for their time today. I know it's a busy time for everyone, and I really hope this sort of event can stimulate cooperation and collaboration and will lead to improved investment terms and ultimately allow us all to achieve the long-term production targets set by the government. Thank you again, everyone. Bye.